So, we're back for another episode on the Bench Mob podcast. But what you may not have noticed, or you may have noticed it, is we've actually dropped off the podcast from our YouTube name now. So we're strictly known as Bench Mob. We thought we made a business decision to make it a bit more just concise and a bit more like a rolling off the tongue, a little bit easier. So I think it's the right decision. But we are still going to do a podcast at times. We haven't done the full-length podcast for a while, so I'm looking forward to having a bit of a conversation, talking NBA and all things alike related to hoops today. And there's a lot of talking points that have been circling around the NBA, I should say. So I'm looking forward to this one, Marcus. How have you been?
I've been very well, thank you. I'm pumped to talk NBA. A lot going on around the league. All NBA teams. JJ Redick potentially being the Toronto Raptors coach, which is crazy to me. And then plenty more. We know Jaylen Brown, JT up for that extension. Yeah, so I'm just happy to be here. Happy to talk some basketball today.
It's always a pleasure. And we had some big news. I mean, it's a little milestone for us. I don't know how big it is for the viewers, but we hit 100 subs. So, you know, we've only just been doing this for under 2 months. So for us to hit that mark and to really, I guess, know that we're having an impact on our viewers and they're actually wanting to subscribe, it makes you want to do these videos more and more. And we just want to thank everyone watching and everyone who has subscribed to the channel. Thank you for that. But it just gives you more motivation to want to do videos like this and put out more content. So without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do this. So let's keep the journey going and hopefully we can reach that 1,000 subs very soon. But without further ado, I should say, the All-NBA teams. So, yeah, they got announced. It was a couple of snubs, controversy on all fronts. Ja Morant, obviously, a notable mention regarding someone who's been snubbed, and now he misses out on about $39 million. But before we discuss any of those snubs and anything related to that, what do you want to announce the All-NBA teams first? And I guess we'll go from the actual predictions that you had for your All-NBA third team, and then what the actual All-NBA third team was and how close we were in our predictions.
Yeah, so I'll just do it briefly. If you do live under a rock, you wouldn't have heard the All-NBA third, second, and first team. So I'll quickly just go through. All-NBA third team, we got De'Aaron Fox, Dame Lillard, LeBron, Randall, Sabonis. Second team, Steph, Donovan, Jimmy, Jaylen Brown, and Nikola Jokic. And then for the first team, we got Luka Doncic, SGA, Jason Tatum, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Joel Embiid. And then, so my assumption on all these teams, I actually really rated them. I think they were very well done. I rate that how they didn't really account, I guess, with the new CBA rule of the minimum games for All-NBA coming to us in the next couple seasons. They kind of applied that to these All-NBA teams. We have guys like you mentioned, Ja Morant, Devin Booker even. Then there's plenty more out there. KD, who didn't make the teams. And I think that's more than fair because to be an All-NBA player, you have to be available. But nevertheless, I'll get into my All-NBA third team. So I had Mr. Kyrie Irving. Now, I think Kyrie might have had arguably a career year, but it's what hurts him is obviously the trade from Brooklyn to Dallas and the whole... There was a lot of controversy with Kyrie and what he put out on social media, and that kind of, that took a heavy load away from him this season, and he wasn't able to play as many games as he probably would have liked. But nevertheless, he averaged around 27. He killed it at Dallas and he killed it at Brooklyn, but Dallas not really winning too many games. I think Kyrie's season went unnoticed, but he was my All-NBA third team starting point guard. SGA was my shooting guard who made the All-NBA first team. I don't really need to validate why. He had a phenomenal season and he was an MVP candidate. And looking back, I don't know how he made my third team, but he did. And then DeMar DeRozan as my small forward. I think that DeMar, he's probably my biggest snub, I think, because you got guys like LeBron, and no doubt is LeBron a All-NBA second or first team caliber play, because he obviously is. He's one of the best players in the world still, But LeBron only played like 56 games for the Lakers, which that's not too many in an 82-game season. DeMar DeRozan basically suits up every single night. I think he played upwards to like 76 games, which is crazy, especially at his age. And then my power forward and center, I got those two right. So I got Julius Randle and Sabonis, who both had phenomenal career years.
Yeah, no, there's arguments to be made for those guys that obviously you put in that didn't get included in Kyrie and DeMar DeRozan. But all in all, I think you did a pretty good job there.
Yeah.
On my front, for my third team, I had 4 out of the 5 players correct. And
Crazy,
I had
bro.
one noticeable snub, which I was pretty disappointed didn't get in, because I thought, again, had a career year, obviously one most improved in Lauri Markkanen. So I had De'Aaron Fox and Lillard as the guards. I had LeBron James at small forward. Somehow I managed to guess that, and I just based it off knowing how the voters usually vote for these kind of things, regardless of the games played. We've seen there's been less games played than LeBron, in terms of the number of games that he played this year compared to some other guys in the previous years that have played less, and they've made the All-NBA team. So I didn't think that would have really played the part in the whole situation of him making an All-NBA team. So that's why I did consider him, and I was right on that front. But obviously Lowry was in my third team. Randall was the other forward in that particular position. And to be honest, I think you could have made a case for Lowry making it again. He was the most improved player. He had tremendous production, was an all-star. Again, maybe the record of the Jazz and not making the play-in didn't help his cause, but, there's always going to be snubs, like we mentioned. There's always going to be guys that miss out, and I think that doesn't take away from the fact that he had a tremendous year, and, he should hold his head very high, because I think any other year without the competitiveness of it, you probably see Lauri Markkanen making an All-NBA team. So I'm not too disappointed about that in terms of putting him in there and thinking that he would have made it, because, if you had looked at the statistics and everything like that, it kind of makes sense. And the center, I got that one right in Domantas Sabonis. I thought, obviously, you can only pick one center in each team, and he was definitely the third best center, or the best center outside of the big two, which is Jokic and Embiid. So he had a career himself, helped the Kings with their resurgence this year alongside De'Aaron Fox, and I think that was a justified selection. So I'm happy with how I've gone so far. That's 4 out of 5 players correct. So yeah, I was pretty accurate with that prediction, which I'm happy to say that I got right.
Yeah, bro, I was at work today, and as we were discussing what to discuss in this pod, we were talking about all NBA teams, and I was looking at the third team and thinking, Danko may or may have not got all these ones right, which was absolutely crazy to think about. But yeah, looking at my All-NBA teams, they aren't the most accurate, but I think during the time of circumstance, it's like they almost deserve to be there. And this was maybe just after a lot of things happened. And one of those things, the main ones, was Ja Morant. Now, Ja Morant had that incident where we don't really need to talk about it too much, but he pulled that gun out at that nightclub, and a lot was going on. And I had Ja Morant in my All-NBA second team. And to be fair, if Ja was playing, I think he'd end up in that All-NBA second team. My shooting guard was Donovan Mitchell, who stepped up massively in the regular season, I'll say, especially defensively. So I thought that jump defensively, and even as, I wouldn't say a primary playmaker because Darius Garland's still there, but he showed us he could definitely serve as a primary option, as a primary playmaker for any given team if needed in the regular season. I don't know about the playoffs. I don't know if he can lead your team as that main guard still, but he's a hell of a player, and he was my shooting guard for my All-NBA second team. Small forward LeBron, he made the All-NBA third team, and yeah, there's not too much to say about LeBron. I mean, he killed it again, year 20. Games kind of let him down, but if he was healthy, I think in real life, he definitely would have been All-NBA second or first team. And then a snub KD. He was my power forward, and we didn't know KD was going to be injured at the Phoenix Suns. I think that hurt him a lot, and he missed being an All-NBA player. Hey, and I think that's fair because he didn't really play too many games this season. So I think he deserves to be out of the All-NBA contention. And then my center, Joel Embiid. I just thought you got B1, B2. Obviously, in the MVP, Embiid got the nod. So you got to give the nod to Embiid to make All-NBA first team. But it's a hair between these guys, either or. Hey, I'm not here to debate because I know a lot of people put their life on the line when debating over Nikola and Embiid. They're both phenomenal players. So, yeah, if you're watching, don't get on my case about it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That MVP discussion, the fact that it starts so early in the year and, you know, it changes, 10 times within the season. I think they just need to leave it for the last 2 weeks of the year and then determine it there. I think it's just too much of a clickbait thing for all these big media outlets to just have some content to push out, I guess. But in saying that, my All-NBA second team, Steph Curry and Donovan Mitchell as my guards. Again, this was right after we made our predictions to, I guess, back you up on this. We did make our predictions before all these guys came back from injury or we knew the full extent of it. And Curry was out at this point, but I sort of
You backed him to come back. Yeah. I remember that.
Correct. And I knew that the production was going to be there no matter what, regardless if he came back and, played 10 games, 15 games, whatever he did end up playing at the end of the back end of the year.
Yeah.
But I think, you can't leave him out. If he's playing enough games and he's on a winning team that makes the playoffs and he's productive, you got to put him in. And Donovan Mitchell obviously had a hell of a season, fell short in the playoffs. And like you mentioned, he is a guy that whether he can lead a team or not, that's a big question mark. But obviously had a fantastic year, highlighted by that 70-point game or 71-point game that he had against the Chicago Bulls. And that's a historic mark, and I think he was well-deserved. And that move was, I guess, or the trade that the pieces that they gave up, I should say, to get him, it was vindicated at the end. And I think, again, they didn't have the playoff success they wanted, but I think overall had a really successful year. I had KD as my forward. I thought that he'd play more games, a bit like the Steph Curry one. I sort of forecasted that he would be healthy, but he obviously had some injury issues and concerns while he was at the Phoenix Suns during the regular season. So that's probably why he misses out. It's had nothing to do with his form on the court, because when he was on court and healthy and playing, he was arguably the best player in the league. And he proved that night in and night out, but he just wasn't available enough. So I can understand why they snubbed him. This forward was correct, but in the wrong team. It was Julius Randle, so he obviously made the third team, but I had him in my second team.
Valid.
And finally, I had Joel Embiid in my center spot because when we did our MVP predictions, I predicted Jokic would be a 3-time MVP winner, and hence why the MVP winner always goes in the first team ahead of the other candidate. So in that case, I had Jokic going into my first team as opposed to Embiid. So I got that one, those two incorrect in terms of where they slotted in, but or three of those players, but obviously two of them made it, but just not in the right team. But I was pretty happy with my initial prediction, and obviously I couldn't predict a few of those situations taking place, and I reckon I was pretty close with that one as well.
Yeah, once again, almost spot on with the All-NBA second team, besides obviously the Joel and Nikola Jokic one. But I mean, how could anyone predict this? It's either you're all Jokic or you're all Embiid, and the people who are in between, they just can't win, can they? Because, I don't know, everybody seems to want to have, a bit of an edge. Or Nikola Embiid, whoever it is, they're both deserving. But leading on to my All-NBA first team, so Luka Doncic, he was my point guard, or my lead guard.
Mm-hmm.
Don't really need to validate why. If the Mavericks made the play-in and all the playoffs, he'd be more in that MVP discussion. he's killing it. He arguably could be still the best player in the world, but it's just Dallas crumbled, and after the Kyrie trade, the fit just didn't really look too good. But yeah, I think Luka will bounce back next year, and I hope they can be back in the playoffs, and hopefully soon, if not next year or the season after, Luka can be an MVP, because who wouldn't love to see that? But my shooting guard, this might be controversial. I had Jaylen Brown in my All-NBA first team, and to be fair, he made the second team, so I don't look as bad with him making the All-NBA second team. But yeah, he was my first team, and I don't actually know what I was thinking and what was my reason for putting him in this first team, because SGA, I'm looking at it now, he's in my third team. I could have switched the two, but I think maybe I went with the route of Celtics won more games, which is pretty stupid because OKC almost made the playoffs, and they won 20 more games than last year. An SGA MVP candidate, Jaylen Brown did his thing, but yeah, I actually can't believe I put him in my All-NBA first team. And then the rest of it was pretty much right. I got Jason Tatum, Giannis Antetokounmpo. They both made it. And then Nikola Jokic was my All-NBA first team. And obviously, you switch Embiid and Jokic, and then that's almost spot on. But it's not, but it is. To a set. To a T.
You did a pretty good job there. Like, it was definitely better than my second team. I think, obviously, I had three guys that weren't correct in that slot. You only had the SGA and Jaylen Brown one, and Jokic and Embiid. So, you did a pretty good job. They're pretty accurate.
Thank you, man.
So, going on to mine. Actually, firstly, going to the SGA point about, you were thinking at the time, or they made the play-in, or they nearly made the playoffs. Well, at the time, though, they were actually outside of the play-in when we did those predictions. So, it kind of makes sense why you had him in the third team. They would have been, I'd say, maybe 11th or 12th at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe I just underestimated how much better they were this season than last season, just record-wise. And it doesn't always come down to, like, if they're in the playoffs. I mean, you could be a 10th seed and last season be bottom of the standings, and that's still like a phenomenal jump. But I do think I definitely underestimated how much of an influence he had on that OKC Thunder team. And obviously Jaylen Brown has a huge impact on the Celtics, respectfully. But at the same time, they got plenty of depth there with Smart, Derek White, Malcolm Brogdon. So yeah, it just makes me have a bit of an off feeling in the stomach that I put in my first team, to be honest. Like, I'm getting a bit of anxiousness just looking at it. Just made up a word.
I think Jaylen Brown would have been justified, to be fair. He's had a phenomenal season, and just his progress and his development over the years from when he came into the league compared to now, it's just been an incredible jump that he's made. So I think he's definitely an All-NBA first-team caliber player. So, and with the positionless All-NBA teams next year, we're going to see a completely different setup with these teams, and a lot of these guys that made it might not have made it next year based off the fact that they might just put 5 guards in one team. You know what I mean? To be the 15 best players in the league. So We'll see how that plays out next year, how they vote. It will be interesting because it's going to be a very different theme to it than this year's teams. But anyway, going on to my first team, I was pretty accurate with this, but the only player that I didn't hit on was Nikola Jokic. I had him in my first team because I had him winning MVP. You switch him and Embiid out, and I got all the other ones right. I had Luka at the lead guard to accompany SGA. And to be fair, Luka, I think we're a bit hard on him because if you look at the numbers that he had, finished second in scoring. He was phenomenal all year. He averaged 8 and 8 rebounds, 8 assists to go along with that 32 or 33 points that he put up. And the fact that we're hard on him, because obviously he didn't make the playoffs, which you have to sort of, you have to have that kind of level of expectation for him to make the playoffs, especially with, the kind of player that he is. So I think that's why a lot of fans thought that even though he had such a big season, it was a disappointment and it we probably took away from how dominant he was, and hence why the voters put him in the All-NBA first team, because I think that just shows how high they value him in this league. And like you said, he could arguably be the best player in the world. And he shows that night in, night out, that no one can guard him. But he just has to work on his conditioning next year. And I think as long as he can do that, as long as he can come into the season fit, healthy, raring to go, and not have any of these question marks about, is he ready to go? Has he done the right things in the off season? Blah, blah, blah. I think nothing will stop him. If he does that, he's his own worst nightmare at times. I think that's, if we want to put it that way. But SGA, you know, the jump that he made, remarkable, and the amount of impact and influence he has on that OKC team and the improvement that they've shown, a lot of it's thanks to SGA. He had 45, 30-point games this year. I think
crazy.
Well and truly deserved All-NBA first team honors. Jason Tatum, on the other hand, he was deserving, but the way he's playing in the playoffs, which we'll get to in a moment, regarding the Supermax extension for both him and Jaylen Brown. But you could almost argue the case that Jaylen Brown is more valuable to that Celtics team than Jaylen Brown. But obviously, during the regular season, Tatum was an MVP candidate, and he proved that he was still a top 10 player in this league, arguably. And, you know, justified that he's in that All-NBA first team. Giannis, that speaks for itself. And obviously, Nikola Jokic, we've seen what kind of season he put together and the kind of damage he's doing in the playoffs. And I think I'm actually glad he didn't win the MVP, as weird as that is to say, because it took a bit of the pressure off him going into this playoffs, because I think had he won it for the third time in a row, you could look at it and then he might have all this weight of expectation on him to say now he's a 3-time MVP, not only 3 times, but he's won it back to back to back.
Yeah. Bro, the NBA world would be in an absolute frenzy if Nikola Jokic won back-to-back-to-back. I could only imagine how much slander the Nuggets would get every single game if they were to lose. And, they're both so deserving. It's just so annoying how the NBA community just can't really seem to, just appreciate greatness while it's kind of available, because we're not going to get another player like Nikola Jokic probably ever again. But all people seem to 100%. Think about is oh, he's not the MVP this year, or he is the MVP this year. Just let the games play out. Nobody's not deserving. All 3, Giannis, Embiid, Jokic, they were all deserving. It's just, it happened to go Embiid's way.
Exactly. And like I said, I think going back to that, with Jokic, he can just play freely now without having that, worry about that MVP being awarded to him hanging on his head or hanging on his back or hanging on his shoulder, I should say. And, he can just go out there and play freely and prove that he's out here to win a championship, and that's his main focus, which it always has been. And I think now with that healthy supporting cast and everyone pulling their weight, helping to take the load off Jokic a bit, and then I guess he makes other players better with that 2-man game, him and Jamal Murray. And I guess when the ball's in his hands, it always helps because the guy's off the ball and moving because they know he's going to get rid of the ball. And I think that's shown in these playoffs so far. But that's the reason why I had him in my first team, because I thought he would win MVP. But I'm glad he didn't, and Embiid's got more pressure on him now because of that. So, yeah, out of the 15 players, though, I had 13 out of the 15 players correct. Obviously, not all of them were in the correct teams, but the only 2 I didn't get right in terms of the predictions were KD and Lauri Markkanen.
Which is crazy.
I'm really impressed with that.
That's insane, man. I think, this is in all of total players who, the players who didn't get snubbed. So players who, those it could be any order of any of those teams. All those guys made All-NBA. 13 of the 15.
Yeah.
I think, looking at mine, Kyrie didn't make it, DeMar didn't make it, Ja didn't make it, LeBron didn't make it, KD didn't make it, that's 5.
No, LeBron made it.
Oh yeah, LeBron did make it. Okay, so I had 4 players who didn't make it, which, that's not the greatest, I don't think.
Well, it's 11 out of 15 though, it's pretty solid.
I mean, I'll take it. Yeah, it's solid, but nothing on your level.
I mean, yeah, I nearly could have. I'm surprised about Lowry, to be honest. But
Yeah.
out of all of them, KD obviously not playing enough games, but I can understand not putting him in. But like I said, I'll take 13 out of 15, and it just shows that I had the eye for it.
Yeah.
Bit of arrogance there, but no, we did. In total, out of the 30 players between us, we got 24 out of 30. So that's a pretty solid effort.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And that's why this is the best. The bench mob is where it's at, and you have to subscribe, ladies and gentlemen.
100%. We got that basketball knowledge. So
that's what we do, baby.
Make sure you hit that sub button, and we'll have plenty more content coming your way, guys. But moving on from this, obviously, I guess seeing as though we are on the topic of all NBA players and all NBA teams, let's talk about Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, that situation in the Celtics. Obviously, they're in a playoff series at the moment with the Sixers. We expected them to bounce back in Game 5, which they didn't. The Celtics dropped that game. Now they're down 3-2 on the brink of elimination in the second round after making the finals the previous year. Obviously, with these teams being announced, Tatum makes first team, Jaylen Brown makes the second team. They're now both eligible for a Supermax extension, which the combined contract total would be about $613 million between the two.
Bro,
it's just
crazy.
Huge.
13 million.
Yeah.
60 million per season for 5 to 6 years for each of them. Bro, I don't know how a team can function, like a roster can as a whole. Imagine you're in the locker room, there's two guys making 613 million, and say 5 years down the line you got a bunch of like 1 to 2 year almost vet minimum guys like surrounding them. Bro, they're just like, I know the NBA is a business, but how can like a team like the Celtics function if they got two guys? Like, imagine the heads on these guys. I know you can't let money get to like the ego thing, but I don't know. The NBA seems like a league where, besides young teams, I heard about Josh Giddey speaking about this before on a podcast I watched yesterday. Like, the OKC Thunder are very tight-knitted. They hang out together. But I could definitely see a world where it's like Tatum and Brown, the two alpha dogs, they don't really seem to like click with the other Celtics guys as much down the line. I'm not saying Smart, White, Brogdon, all these guys now, but down the line, I don't know if this... I don't know if... Look, you have to re-sign Brown because he's a hell of a player, but it could go south very quick.
Yeah, especially, obviously, there's question marks about Tatum. You saw in that game 5 that just took place, shot the ball like 7 for 21 from the field, and just kept shooting, and he just kept jacking him up, while Jaylen Brown, I think he scored the exact same points on 9 attempts, and he was way more efficient. I think that's the one thing where I can see that there could be a very much like an OKC kind of situation where it's like you have two alpha dogs in Westbrook and Durant, and they don't see, well, not that they don't see eye to eye, they respect each other, but again, one guy thinks he deserves more touches or, deserves to have the ball at the end of the game, or when he's hot, he should be getting the ball. And I think Tatum, I don't know, this might be a big call, but I think he's overrated. I honestly think Jason Tatum's overrated. Is that bold of me to say, or is that a big call? But personally speaking, I just think, he's got very good two-way potential, don't get me wrong, and I think his ability to play both sides of the ball is excellent, but so does Jaylen Brown, you know what I mean? And I think Jason Tatum, I don't feel like he's got as big of a bag as a guy like Jaylen Brown potentially could in the next year, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. I feel like a lot of, especially Celtics fans, they kind of tend to go towards the area where it's like Tatum's the top 5 player, Tatum's the top 10 player. Like, just let the man play like throughout his career, and he's obviously a phenomenal talent. But when we start labeling him as like future MVP, like already a top 5 player, it just kind of takes the fun out of it. Like, how can anybody live up to expectations with this amount of load? And I know, like, this is why they play, this is why they're in the NBA, but yeah, it could really hinder not necessarily a player's development from a standpoint, but an overall team perspective, because we've seen the same story before. Like you mentioned, I'll allude to what you just said with KD and Russ, but even your team, like Washington Wizards, John Wall and Brad Beal, like they might be bros on the court. I mean, bros off the court. Like they might be guys, but at the end of the day, I think that split kind of happened because it's just two alpha dogs, and one, I don't know, they don't match eye to eye on the court. One takes the more shots, and they just didn't really feed off each other as well as they thought they were going to progress once getting so far, I guess, against that Celtics team with IT and of that nature. But it's really tricky because you don't know until you kind of give it a shot, and I think their best shot of winning another championship is keeping Jaylen Brown. And I'll let you speak on it first, but yeah, I definitely, yeah, I have more to say, but I won't jump in and just, say too much.
No, I honestly would rather build around Jaylen Brown. I think Jaylen Brown's not as ball dominant,
yeah,
but he can still put up like really, really great numbers.
Yeah,
I think with Tatum, a guy like him, he needs the ball, and he's always, dribbling, whether it's from the block, he's trying to back down his opponent.
Yeah.
Too
herky-jerky.
Use his footwork and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or he's either isolating up on the 3-point line.
Yeah.
I just feel like he needs the ball more. I don't think he plays as well off the ball. Whereas, like I said, Jaylen Brown, because he came into the league and having to be a guy that sort of knew where his role stood in early days of his career, he sort of learnt how to be effective without needing the touches. And as you saw, like he took 9 attempts and he made 6 of them the other day against the Celtics and scored as many points, like I mentioned, as Jason Tatum did on that same night on 12 less shots, you know what I mean, on one less field goal made. So for me personally, Jason Tatum, he's a volume shooter who needs the ball in his hands a lot of the time to be effective.
So like a
Jaylen Brown,
Carmelo
great
Anthony.
defender, he's correct.
Yeah.
Jaylen Brown's improved his ball handling year in, year out. That was one question mark when he came into the league, that he didn't have a left hand as much. He's worked on that. Still probably could use a little bit more improvement, but I think, again, it's only going to get better. He's an intelligent guy. He's good on defense. He's athletic. He's tough. I think it's all the character, and he's a very bright and intelligent guy. You know what I mean? Like he was.
Yeah. Could have gone to Harvard, couldn't he?
He was the president of the basketball, or of the NBA Players Association. Sorry. So all of that put together. I'm not saying Tatum's not intelligent, but I'm just pointing out, like you've got a complete player and a complete person in Jaylen Brown. So for me, if I was the Celtics front office, I would keep Jaylen Brown, build around him, and I'd try to get a maximum haul for Jason Tatum and see what you could possibly secure for him in a trade. And knowing that what players have, or what teams have had to give up for certain players in particular trades over the recent years. Crazy. Yeah, imagine what a team would have to pay to get Jason Tatum to their side and what the Celtics would request in return. Yeah. So something to consider. Yeah. But I think all things said, from my side, Jaylen Brown, to me, is someone who I would preferably build around. Yeah.
Look, bold move, very bold move. I don't think... Look, you said before, like, it would be controversial, but I reckon if we do have a lot of Boston fans watching this video, they might not be too happy with you, but I understand where you're coming from, personally, because I do agree, like, Tatum, sometimes he's too pretty with it, and it's just like, how can we, like, almost function the offense when Jaylen Brown could literally going off? All he needs is that, just a swing, and he can just catch and shoot. Sometimes that's all you need. Or a one dribble mid-range pull-up. Tatum's just between spin move, like, go on the post, let me see this fadeaway. So I don't know. I don't really know, but a trade I had in mind, this was a hypothetical, and I don't know who I'd rather, because I like the idea of Jaylen Brown's two-way ability, and I think he's a more efficient scorer, but then Tatum's just like, he's obviously a superstar of our league, and I think he's the better player, but I don't know, or better talent, I should say. But I don't know if he's the better player to function, like put plays around him necessarily. But a trade hypothetical, I guess I came up with, and this is a long shot, but say if Jaylen Brown was to request a trade from the Celtics and they didn't give him this Supermax deal, which who knows, they might not. Like, it's a lot of money. A lot of people are saying he's worth that 180 mil anyway, and he's not worth that Supermax. So if that is to come, maybe like a team like Golden State could put together a trade of Jordan Poole and Andrew Wiggins and a couple picks for Jaylen Brown and Derek White. I don't think that's the best trade, but I also think that could be viable if the Celtics were still trying to compete for a championship, and obviously they would be. But yeah, I just think it's a situation where if the Celtics don't give them that Supermax, they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. But I think winning solves everything, and they're down in this series, but it's something Boston really need to evaluate. And if they win, this could all be resolved. But if they lose, there might be a lot of talk in the off-season. I don't know. Anything can happen in this league.
I think just the final point I want to make about this is I do really want to see Jaylen Brown have his own team. I think, like I said, he's too good a player to... It's basically 1A and 1B, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think he's too good of a player just to be taking a back seat on nights with Jason Tatum next to him, you know what I mean? I think I'd love to see him on a team. Ideally, maybe even the Houston Rockets. I don't know how they would make that work, but obviously he has a really good relationship with Ime Udoka, and you know, I think Udoka would be able to harness Jaylen Brown's full potential, especially in the fact that he'd give him the keys, he'd give him a license to obviously be able to take on more of the load, take on more of the brunt in terms of the offense, and be that guy that can help, I guess, because he's been around a really good system in the Boston Celtics.
Yeah.
And so he'll take all those good habits from a winning organization like that, and an organization that has really, you know, high expectations and high standards for their players. Not saying that Houston Rockets don't, but again, with that young group there, a lot of the guys, you know, they're not necessarily NBA players, even though they are. They're really good players. Like Jalen Green, I don't think he's a bad player by any stretch of the imagination, but I just don't think he knows how to play the NBA game the right way.
Yeah, and he hasn't had the
guy
vets,
in like Jaylen Brown,
like to help him kind of harness the NBA ready game. He's kind of just been thrown in the fire too much, and you bring in a guy like Jaylen Brown. Jalen Green has a similar skill set, so I think that could definitely work out. I love the fit.
Yeah, and like I said, I think it would be good to see him lead a younger team and help them, I guess, build them up from the bottom down, pretty much being a team that's competing for lottery picks and a team that's competing for the number one pick, to bring them all the way back and hopefully into playoff contention. Because I think the Rockets, they're too good of a franchise and they've got too much history to be struggling and to be, you know, battling for the number one draft pick every single season. So I think that the best move they made initially, obviously, is the move to get Ime Udoka as the head coach. He wanted to take that challenge on, and all they need now is a perfect player like Jaylen Brown to throw into the mix to help them on that upward ascent and upward trajectory. So, I mean, we'll watch this space and we'll see, depending on how this whole playoff series eventuates against the Sixers, whether they get out of this series.
Yeah,
there's going to be a lot of questions to answer, and I guess posed to that front office, Brad Stevens, and the whole Boston Celtics front office themselves. But we'll wait and see. But I think we've put our arguments forward, and I guess we'll just
wait and see
what happens from here.
Yep.
Yeah.
Should we lean towards the route of, I don't know if the news was today or it was yesterday. It's been a hell of a busy day, but this just came to my attention. I thought it was just crazy because I almost watch this man's podcast every single day. That's JJ Redick, and it took me by surprise because what coaching pedigree does JJ Redick have as a coach. Like, he could be a hell of a coach, but like, I thought this was fake when I saw it.
Coaches
Like,
his son's team.
bro, I could not. He coaches his son team. Yeah, I could not believe it, man. Like,
Yeah, he's like 8-year-old son's team. That's the only thing he coaches.
yeah, like, it's crazy. He might be a great veteran in the league, and maybe that's all they need for a coach. But like, Nick Nurse to be fired, and then they're looking at the route of potentially hiring JJ Redick. Like, this man, I love him. I love JJ Redick. His dark humor, or his dry humor, I should say. It's hilarious. Like, I could just imagine JJ in a timeout being like, "Hey, listen, pal, OG, you gotta swing the ball to Freddie, man. Freddie's open for the shot. What the are you doing?" Like, he gives me that energy. But yeah, I really don't know how the fit would work with JJ in Toronto. With a 3-point specialist, obviously a small guard like Freddie. Will he come back? We don't know. Maybe JJ could try, I guess, if he was the coach, recruit him back to Toronto and say, "I want you as my starting point guard. This is how we're going to run the offense almost through you. Or you're going to be a pivotal part of this Raptors team, and we want to compete for championships for years to come, and we want you a part of that." Maybe they're looking at that route, but yeah, there's many questions to be answered here. How can a guy like JJ Redick come in and coach the Raptors if he is to, and utilize Scotty Barnes, Pascal Siakam, OG in a system where, I mean, obviously we'd assume it would be a 3-point philosophy, just based off how JJ Redick basketball mind kind of works. So, and also, how will his role in the media change? Like, because I don't know about you, but I want to continue to watch the JJ Redick podcast. And if he's coaching, I don't think he can do that, which that'll suck. So personally, I don't want JJ Redick to coach. I want him to stick to the podcasting game, as controversial as that sounds. But yeah, what did you think about this?
I'm torn on this because I really love JJ Redick.
Yeah.
And I think he would make an excellent coach, personally speaking. I just don't want to see a situation the likes of Steve Nash, where he's thrown in to that situation because a guy like KD and Kyrie both said they wanted him as the coach. They fire Kenny Atkinson, and then Steve Nash gets thrown to the Wolves pretty much, and he loses control over those guys because, you know, he doesn't have that coaching experience. Or yes, he's got the respectability as a player. Obviously, he's won 2 MVPs, and, you know, has a tremendous basketball resume and pedigree, but he doesn't have any coaching experience to fall back on. So that's how he doesn't have that ability to keep the group aligned. And I'm worried that might happen with JJ Redick.
Yeah.
Mind you, they might be 2 different personalities. For what I can see, JJ's a bit more of like he'll put you in your place when you need to, but he's still like a great guy to sort of help build these young guys up. And I think he's understanding, because you could see even in the arguments that he makes on First Take or when he's talking on his pod, he's very... He'll be very understanding, and he'll also be very
passive, aggressive,
analytical about it, and he'll only provide pure facts and stats, you know what I mean, to back up what he's saying. He'll never just say something for the sake of it. And I think that'll be the same when he addresses stuff to his players. He's not going to just attack a player for a specific reason if he doesn't have something to back that up on, you know what I mean? And I think players will respect him for that, the fact that he's been a veteran in this league for a very long time. I think because he spent a lot of the time as a role player, he sort of understands the nuances, because, you know, you are a bit more, how do I say it, you're more of a perfectionist. You really want to perfect your craft. And the stories of what I've heard of him, you know, he had that same routine every single game day. He was very diligent with all that preparation and putting up shots. And I think the same would come with his coaching when he would be watching vision, you know, breaking down a scouting report for a specific matchup, you know, showing footage to his players to obviously know what to expect from a specific opponent. Even when you watch him on his podcasts, and when him and Tim Legler talk together, whenever Tim Legler's on the show, they're just, the way that they describe certain plays, and they're he's got such a high basketball IQ, and I think it would be a really good fit for them, to be honest. Despite all I've already said about Steve Nash and him being thrown to the wolves. But one last point I want to make with this is, I think that you saw that even with the camaraderie that he had with Trey Murphy on the podcast, how they were like bantering, and they had that, they were talking shit to one another pretty much, even though it was in a friendly manner. I think he's got that kind of relationship that he can have with players, but again, he's got that serious and stern side that he can put people in their place when they need to be put in their place. And I don't think it necessarily be a bad move, but again, because you look at a guy like Eric Spoelstra, for example, was a video coordinator for the Miami Heat, and then Pat Riley promoted him to a head coaching role. Mind you, he obviously had experience within the organization, and he was doing obviously scouting, etc. But JJ Redick's doing no different in the media, and also through his commentating and having that podcast. He's basically doing the same thing. He's breaking down the game of basketball.
Yeah.
So if he's got that knowledge and understanding of the game to a really high level and high degree, if Eric Spoelstra can do it, there's no reason why JJ Redick can't.
Yeah.
So that's me personally speaking. I think you see that guys who had less success as players in terms of accolades, and they weren't star players, they tend to be the guys that succeed as coaches, whether they were a lesser player that never made the NBA, or a guy that was maybe just a role player because they understood the finer details of the game and how to really perfect your strengths and turn your strengths into, I guess, a positive for the team.
Yeah. Just touching base off the points you kind of brought up about JJ Redick almost being able to connect with guys like Trey Murphy and young players, veterans in the league. I think that's really important. And one thing to kind of mention off that is JJ Redick's throughout his career or journey, I guess his basketball journey, he's been the man at Duke University, killed it there, superstar, megastar over there, came in the NBA, had to find a role for the Orlando Magic, and he found that role coming off the bench as a three-point shooter. Then he went to the Clippers. We know what he did there. He killed it. Probably his peak, I guess, basketball was over there. And then to Philly. And then ending his career as a veteran who might not have even been worth playing on the court. Maybe not to that extent, but look, his days at Dallas and that last year in New Orleans looked really difficult. So he can kind of relate to all these players on a level where it's no matter if you're the star, you're the sixth man, you have no role yet, I think or you're the man, which he was at Duke, I think he can definitely connect with all these guys. And maybe at some point in his career, he would have had guys like Stan Van Gundy, who I've heard wasn't the best. He was a great coach, don't get me wrong, but I heard he wasn't the best players coach. And maybe JJ's a guy on that team who brought everybody together, like Gilbert Arenas and Dwight Howard, all these guys. So it's always the not the biggest names like you said, but the guy in the locker room that just makes things go like that. And you would assume JJ Redick's that guy. So for that reason, heck, maybe JJ Redick would be a great coach in the league. It just took me by surprise though.
No, definitely, especially because he's established himself in the media now, and obviously he's sort of found his niche and his, I guess, calling, which was being a really good analyst. And obviously that podcast is one of the best basketball podcasts out and about at the moment, the Old Man and the Three, shout out.
Shout out Tommy Alter.
But yeah, that's it, Tommy Alter, the unheralded bloke on the pod. He's a legend. But yeah, just like I said, with the way the coaching situations are brought into the NBA now, I think, yes, you got guys with experience who have had head coaching experience in the past, but I feel like maybe sometimes it is good to have that, fresh perspective or fresh outlook on things, like a guy such as JJ Redick would bring, because you get a lot of these guys that recycle. For example, the Hornets, they sacked James Borrego, and brought back a guy who they already sacked previously in Steve Clifford. It's that to me doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? And there's other situations you've seen in the past in the NBA that's happened a lot too in that sense. But I think, there is some guys out there you'd feel hard done by if you were a coach and you weren't getting a look in, like Mark Jackson, for example. We've mentioned him before on a couple of episodes with the Houston Rockets, where you mentioned you'd like to see him coach that Rockets team. A guy like that would be good for the Raptors. He saw what he did with the Warriors and helped Steph and Clay develop into the players they are today, and pretty much, was the guy that helped set the tone for that whole dynasty. But I think, like I said, some teams prefer that fresh perspective. You look at the NFL, Sean McVay with the Rams, he was a young coach. He came in, Mike McDaniel. It's happening in the NFL as well. A lot of young guys. Obviously, they've paid their dues at other teams. But I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing if a young guy comes in. But you just have to make sure that he's respected, and we don't want to see situations like Steve Nash happen, like I mentioned. So it's just, you got to find that, I guess, level playing field from both ends, and just find the even ground where it's like you're not going for inexperience, but also you're not going for a situation where it might just be a recycled coach like Steve Clifford. So we'll just watch this space, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. I think, to your point, I think it's a great, I guess, bringing in, maybe coaching philosophy is outdated. Obviously, the game's changing. A lot more threes are being put up. And there's not many guys who've kind of played in the NBA and actually lived that adjustment. And JJ Redick's one of them. He's played in the early 2010s. And he's played in the modern era, and obviously the game's changed a great amount. And I think JJ Redick, being a part of that Clippers team, that was probably one of the first teams to do it. Who they took a lot of threes. So yeah, maybe the Raptors, maybe this is the coach they need. But I guess we'll find out. If he gets hired though, I think it's going to be sick and definitely unexpected. Nobody would have thought.
So this one obviously has been circling around the NBA for a couple of weeks now. Obviously, it centers around the Milwaukee Bucks. We never got a chance to touch on this, but it's sort of come back into relevancy again with Giannis posting on Instagram a couple of days ago saying he's tired of the disrespect. I'm coming. So obviously, we know the background with how the Bucks got eliminated to the Miami Heat. Giannis's health was put into question. Obviously, when he came back, he didn't look 100%. And obviously, Mike Budenholzer made some questionable calls at the end of the game, of that elimination game, Game 5. And, Grayson Allen didn't get a shot off. Euro stepped into the lane and the time ran out. And basically, that's how their season ended. So it was a very unfortunate way for their season to end. And a lot of things didn't go their way for the Milwaukee Bucks. And then we obviously found out that Mike Budenholzer's brother had passed away just a week before that series, so obviously his whole mind was clouded by that. And I don't actually know if it was a week before the series or it would have happened sometime during the series anyway, but his mind would have been clouded with all of that stuff as well. And he's eventually been fired now, but you can argue the case that he maybe would have been fired 2 years ago had they not won that championship, had Giannis not come back from that hyperextended knee and dropped 50 to save their season and eventually win them the title. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on this and what you make of where the Milwaukee Bucks currently stand. I'll chime in after, but where they stand at the moment, and I guess what their moves for the off-season would be, both regarding a coach and just overall roster shake-up.
Yeah, so was it wrong by the Bucks, or was it needed because of those questionable decisions in Game 6? I think Mike Budenholzer, I don't know, he was a bit stiff, but then at the same time, it's like, it's a series they definitely should have won. Miami just snuck in the play-in. Bucks people, a lot of people had them winning the chip. So, yeah, I mean, was it valid? I think it was. In terms of coaching targets for the Bucks, I think obviously Nick Nurse priority one. I think Ty Lue, we've heard the mutters that this season that like maybe the Clippers isn't it, and maybe he would move on and coach somewhere else because like he had championship expectations for this team. But if Paul George and Kawhi aren't playing, it's like how can you possibly coach the team when it's just a bunch of dudes, and it's kind of like you're selling yourself short almost by coaching them. Kenny Atkinson's another target who's a great coach, and then two others, just some names you could put out, I guess. I don't think they're likely targets, but Frank Vogel, depends how much you rate him. A lot of people don't, a lot of people do. And then I can't list coaches without naming Mark Jackson. I think it's long overdue. I don't think he'll coach the Bucks, but hoping he gets another shot in the NBA to coach. But in terms of the Bucks as an organization, I think they really got to consider what's next for Chris Middleton. Now he isn't that all-star caliber player. Is he a potential trade target? And what can you even actually get back for Chris Middleton? Like, is it a guy like a Kristaps Porzingis or a Kyle Kuzma from your team, or is it a young asset like a DeAndre Hunter and John Collins or something like that? I really don't know what his worth is anymore, but I think this Bucks team's getting awfully old, and it's really about who stays and who goes. Like when you take a look, I'll just list out some names in this Bucks team. You got Chris Middleton, 31, Wesley Matthews, 36, Brook Lopez is 35, Joe Ingles is 35, Drew Holiday's getting old at 32, Dragic is 37, probably on his way out. They gave up a lot to get Jay Crowder, and he's probably not going to be there, and he didn't play for them in the playoffs. He's 32, so yeah, and then even Giannis's brother, he's 30, and I know he doesn't play, but there's really not a lot of young assets that they do have to develop besides Marjon Beauchamp. And yeah, he has upside, but it's no certain thing that he becomes a very solid NBA player. So yeah, I think the longer they don't make a move, the more likely it is that Giannis would potentially leave him, which is really weird to say because it just sounds like he should be a one-team player.
Buck for life.
Yeah, buck for life. But yeah, I'll read out to you this quote that I think was either from early this season or late last season. But Giannis spoke on his long-term home at Milwaukee, but it was kind of like, I'll just read it out. So he said, I think anybody you ask that question that plays basketball, if he said no, he'd be a liar. It's a team that won multiple championships. It's a team with some of the greatest players, if not the greatest player to ever play this game, but it's a no-brainer. Everybody would love to play for Chicago down the line. You never know. You never know how life brings it. Maybe I'll play for Chicago, but right now I'm committed to Milwaukee. So hey, if they don't make moves and things go south and they get worse from here, maybe we could see Giannis in a Chicago Bulls jersey one day, or perhaps somewhere else.
Yeah, it's one of those big question marks, I think, with the way this roster's constructed, and like you mentioned, the question marks around Chris Middleton. He was an all-star once upon a time and a really highly valued player, but came off an injury-riddled season. That trio of Holiday, Middleton, and Giannis didn't really play much basketball together this year. And again, there's questions to be asked of how much longevity that whole trio can have together on the court. Obviously, Drew Holiday had a productive season, made an all-star team, and was an all-defensive caliber player. But the question mark will be around Chris Middleton because his player option's about $40 million coming up this year, and besides like young guys like you mentioned, obviously you have Marjon Beauchamp, and you've got Grayson Allen, who's still relatively young, and Bobby Portis. So you've still got a Pat Connaughton, but they're not really, like I said, besides Portis and Allen still have some value, but Pat Connaughton, he's just a role player, and yeah, they're not young anymore. And Giannis, I think the way he is as a player, he's helped the Milwaukee Bucks win the championship, which was his aspiration while he was with the organization. He said, I want to bring a championship to this city. He's done that now. And, could he be on his way out soon? That could be a genuine option for him. And, there's a possibility, like you mentioned, you read that quote out with the Bulls. I wouldn't rule that out. Or even going to the New York Knicks, being a part of a big market team.
It'd be crazy, man.
Especially, I think that's something that the Knicks would definitely could use. Obviously, any team could use Giannis, but, having a guy like Giannis on the Knicks would just elevate them further and really get them over the hump. They probably could arguably make them championship contenders from the jump. And I guess a spot where it could be like this was probably a tough landing spot for him, but I think if they can pair up him and Luka in Dallas, that would be must-see TV every single night. So
I like that.
I'd love to see him in Dallas personally.
Yeah.
But I do also have a soft spot for players staying with their original team, like guys like Damian Lillard, respected, especially in a small market like Milwaukee. For a guy like Giannis to be there as long as he has, and to continue to repay the faith for the opportunity that they did provide him when he first got drafted into the league, I think those kind of guys, it's just a rare commodity in today's NBA. Not like back in the day when Dirk played his whole career with the Mavericks, or you've got Kobe playing with the one franchise. It just, like I said, it's a very rare occurrence now, and you kind of feel bad for them being in situations which aren't catered for their particular demands or needs in terms of wanting to win a title, and especially if they decide to rebuild. I don't think Giannis would be wanting to be in that position to start from scratch again, because he's already done that pretty much. He's seen the worst of that Milwaukee Bucks team, and obviously he's brought them to the highest of highs. So it'll be interesting how they attack this off-season. I think the coach will have a massive part in, or the decision that who they decide to select as coach, I should say, will have a massive part of how their season goes next year. And obviously, if you get a guy like Nick Nurse and replace him replace Mike Budenholzer with a guy like Nick Nurse, I should say, you're getting, I guess you're not really losing out, because you got a championship winning coach replacing one for another. So I think that would definitely help them, and Nick Nurse's mentality and attitude and mindset, and he's got a really good basketball mind. I think that'll help this team, but they just need to work out, like I said, like you said, with those 30-plus-year-old guys that they have on their roster.
Yeah.
What do they decide to do with them? And it's tough, because now I think they're already over or close to the luxury tax line. They're $20 million above the salary cap on the new CBA. So it's going to be very tough how they restructure things, but fingers crossed for them, and hopefully they can sort things out, and I'm sure they will. They've got a great front office who've made really good decisions in the past, but obviously some questionable ones over this last couple of months. But we'll just have to see what happens in the off season, and I guess we'll touch base on it then. And when they do announce a coach and whatever they decide to do with their roster, we'll obviously analyse that further as the months progress.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you have Giannis, you're any chance, so they could bounce back next season. We're not ruling it out completely, but I would say it's looking more and more likely that the decline of Middleton and Lopez, he'll be 36, I think, next season. You would assume that things might go downhill, but it'll be interesting if they do anything this off season, because I think it's going to be difficult for them to make a move, but at the same time, it's kind of necessary, especially if you're thinking about, from Giannis's perspective, would he want this team to, would he want the Bucks to kind of make a move, or would he be kind of unwilling to trade for the Bucks to trade his co-partner in Chris Middleton for such a long time? Does he still think that this team could contend for championships next season? We're yet to find out, but it's definitely one of the most intriguing topics surrounding the NBA, especially going into next off season.
I think we've pretty much touched on everything that we wanted to in today's podcast. Unless you have anything else to add.
On my perspective, I think we touched base on everything pretty well. All NBA teams, what else we talk? We talk Milwaukee, Jason Tatum, and the Jaylen Brown,
JJ Redick.
Yeah, the JJ Redick thing, which was wild. But yeah, I really enjoyed this pod. Yeah, I hope you guys did too at home. It's Marcus. Stay safe out there. And yeah, if you stumbled across us, hit that sub. I can't even talk, man. It's getting that point of the night.
It's 12:13 in the morning. We're recording this quite late, but
the grind don't stop.
Thanks for the constant support. Thanks for again allowing us to reach 100 subs. It's the first milestone, and hopefully you guys enjoy this podcast. We'll have the long form out, and we'll also have some shorter form videos about each topic coming out over the next few days. So stay tuned for that. Yeah, we got some really dope content coming you guys' way, focusing on all things. We got some history videos. We got everything, man. We got everything on this channel. We got discussion, history, draft videos. Just top 10 list, everything. So, all things basketball. Just sub to us, man. Stay tuned, guys. It's going to be better and better content the longer we do this. So, stay tuned. Keep in touch. Keep in the loop. And we'll be pumping out content on a daily basis. But that's all we have time for tonight. From your boy, Danko. It's been Marcus from the Bench Mob. We love y'all. We out. And we'll see you in the next video. Peace out.